So we'll call the meeting to order. Okay, they're gonna. Can I go to the menu? Here we go. Okay. The appeal of the decisions from the Historic Zoning Commission. I have not memorized this, so that's why I have to have my cue here. Pursuant to the provisions of 2.68030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County by way of a statute writ of certiorari. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decisions of the Historic Zoning Commission. We would ask, as you approach the podium, that when we open the public hearings, that you state your name and give your address. And we ask that you limit your comments, and that if there are several of you that are speaking to the same subject, that you don't repeat different ideas, but you're bringing forth some other points. Okay. At this point, we have the approval of the November 20th meeting minutes.
Move to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moved. At this time, we'll bring forth the consent agenda. And the consent agenda, we will present all at one time. And if there are any items that are on the consent agenda that you would like for us to present, please raise your hand and we'll pull them off the consent agenda. But we will also consider all the consent items on one motion.
Okay, looks like today we have 7 items that have been reviewed by staff and put on the consent agenda. 1209 Paris Avenue, it's an application to demolish a non-historic portion of the house and construct a new addition. 3723 Richland Avenue, an application to construct a rear addition. 229 Cherokee Road, also an addition. 1209A Dallas Avenue, an application to construct an outbuilding behind a non-historic house. Not all in order, I skipped it there. 1209 4th Avenue North, that's an application to construct a rear addition. 2211 Grantland Avenue, it's an application to construct a new outbuilding and to relocate a non-historic shed. And 411 Wilson Boulevard, it's an application to construct a new outbuilding with review of appropriate setbacks. Staff has reviewed these applications, found that they meet their respective design guidelines, and recommend approval of all of them as a consent agenda.
Okay. Seeing none of these have been requested to be pulled forward, then we will consider a motion for the adoption of all the consent agenda items.
I move to approve all the consent items.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Those accepted. Moving on to new business at 204 South 11th Street.
You may remember this one from last year. The previous owner received a permit for a rear addition and began partial demolition in preparation for that addition and a full rehab, and the new owner now seeks demolition of the property. The house was constructed around 1925, and the original form and character-defining features of the building remain intact. Based on its age, form, architectural details, and historic integrity, the house is contributing to the district, and so demolition meets sections 4B, A, and B for inappropriate demolition. Therefore, the applicant is making the case for economic hardship. Because the property is zoned MUL, and so it could be used as a residence or a commercial use or mixed use, the applicant has provided rehabilitation estimates for both residential and commercial use, and the staff has analyzed both scenarios. In an economic hardship case, the rehab costs are those costs required to simply bring the building up to code, and it doesn't include things like high-end finishes. And the applicant has worked with staff to provide at least 3 different scenarios to try to meet that criteria and accomplish that. Typically, that rehab estimate is then compared to the potential value of the property once it's rehabbed. The engineer's report clarifies many of the estimated costs, and additional information was provided by the applicant and is in your staff recommendation. It can be really difficult, as I'm sure you agree, to try to follow the calculations and assessments in a presentation, but it's all outlined in detail in your staff recommendation. So if you don't mind, I'd just like to say in short, staff found with rehab costs for just basic repairs and finishes, there is a loss to the property owner, and so staff recommends demolition. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Again, it's sometimes hard to follow all those calculations that you see there in those charts, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And the applicant's here.
Yeah. I have one question. When you say you analyze the 3 different scenarios, what different is it that when you analyze it for a residential versus commercial?
The rehab costs can be different, and then, of course, the value's different. Right there, a commercial use is going to be valued higher than residential. So we wanted to be sure to look at both cases. And in both cases, there is a loss.
Okay. Do any of you all have any questions of the staff?
I just want to say on the record that I remember another case similar a couple of months ago, whenever, and I think what was important for me at that time, and I think I see it this time, is that there's a statement from a structural engineer that says he is stating that it's not structurally sound and not suitable for renovation or repair. So that's how I sort of hung my hat the last time. So, I mean, that's, I think, important for me to see on this one.
Okay. Any other questions? This item is open for public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come up and address this? You know the drill.
Hello, my name is Matt Schutz, and I live at 605 South 10th Street, just a couple blocks from here. Certainly, you know, I know the staff has done a lot of research, and you guys have looked at this. You know, I do just urge you to make sure that you do feel this is very warranted. I think there are a lot of creative solutions out there, and because there's not a basement, because it's not a very tall structure, even those structures that are deemed structurally deficient can come back to life pretty quickly. And I guess I have one question for the commission and staff, and it may be something that's covered in the staff recommendation, but I just haven't been able to look over it. Does purchase price factor in at all to economic hardship?
Actually, before we have not heard from the applicant, and typically we do hear from the applicant first. Did the applicant wish to speak? No? Yes?
That's all I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is David Baird. I'm an architect. My business is Building Ideas. What we did in order to understand the condition of the building is we did a visual inspection of every piece of the building, looking at how it's structured. What many people may not know about this is that these photos were taken probably a year or so ago, and right now the only thing that's left of that house is the exterior framing, some interior framing. There's no windows. There's the front door that's left. There's no interior finishes. There's no electrical, no plumbing, no mechanical. All that's left are just some of the framing just barely holding up the roof, and then siding. So there's not much left. I don't know if you've actually gone by and seen it lately. It's pretty bad. So what I did is I actually did inspections with a structural engineer and then somebody who remediates mold and asbestos. And with the structural engineer, what he pointed out First off, there's been several fires inside, and that has basically made, I would say, most of the roof unusable. None of the roof framing is remotely to modern day codes, neither is whatever's left of some of the ceiling joist. And the exterior framing, I would say, I forget the percentage that's usable, but not much of it is. There's no headers over doors, no over windows. We have to, basically what's left, and it's in the package, is part of the front wall, part of the side walls, and then about a third of the floor structure we're able to use. And we're keeping the whole front porch, just restoring it. But basically, you're going to have 3 walls and a third of the floor left. And then, and of what's left, then we have to take out the rotten stuff and piece back in the new stuff. And then the foundation part of it is, the piers are okay, but the infill is not okay. So we have to redo that part. So we basically have to redo 3/4 of everything. And then we still have to get the mold and asbestos remediation. So that's what that's what our report is, and the drawings show what's left and what we have to take out, and then what we have to piece back in. And we were asked by staff to do the analysis for both residential and commercial. We kept the same footprint, but what's different is that with a commercial use, you don't really have bedrooms. You've got office space, so there's really less or fewer rooms, but we have to take into account commercial codes, which means you have to have like a fire alarm and stuff like that, and some handicap access into there. So I think it equaled about the same amount, not that much difference. But I think we looked at it thoroughly, and then with staff, what we did is on all the line item costs, we actually looked at each line item to see what a competent renovation would be. It's not the level of the finished product would be at a lower level than its neighbors. Like, we don't have granite countertops. We have plastic laminate cabinets and stuff like that. So that's what we were asked to do, at making it sort of, code minimum, and then see what the numbers came out to be.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think one of the question, is there anyone else that would like to come for us? You had the outstanding question, and on the assessments for both commercial and residential, is the purchase price a consideration?
Yes, it's always a consideration.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay. If there's no other comments from the audience, then I'll close the public hearing and ask you all to address any questions that you might have. Anyone?
This question is for staff, and I guess I don't know what the state of the building is certainly now. From the description, it appears that it's maybe in worse, or it sounds like it's in worse shape than the photographs appear here. And I guess the question is, given that in the staff's analysis and in the case presented by the applicant, certainly they've met the letter of the law. And maybe to greater end, my question would be, does this put many more properties in historic districts at risk? Is maybe, I don't know if it's germane necessarily to this case, but to cases in general.
I think all of that, as you know, everything you do is really on a case-by-case basis, and I think that's certainly true for an economic hardship case. This one's a little bit unique in that it's zoned multi-use, which a lot of our properties are not. And so there were, there's two different avenues to follow. There was actually a third, and that's a mixed use, which we didn't have a value on, so there wasn't really any point in getting rehab estimates for that type of use. So it was just a much trickier case than what you usually see because of the use. So no, I don't think it's really relevant to other cases because it is so unique. It's pretty different. Did that answer?
It does, and probably not an appropriate question, as this is treated on a case-by-case basis. But something the applicant mentioned, which is the current state of the building, is it has a skin and limited interior walls, and as a cost basis, if that's the way it is, it was purchased in that condition. If you bring it beyond that condition as a rehab, certainly that, if you built it new and just brought it up to a condition where there was an exterior skin on it and some interior stud walls, would that not be a more appropriate comparison?
And
this gets back into an argument that, or a line of argument that we had, I think, on a previous case, in that, are you comparing likes when you're determining value? It's more of a math question, I guess.
Yes, and I would say we probably never are truly comparing apples to apples, because there's no way to know for sure when you're looking at the comps what condition those homes are in. We know what the square footage is, we know the purchase price. This one was particularly difficult for comps, again, because of that mixed-use component. There really isn't anything right here in this area quite zoned this way that has sold recently. And certainly, as I'm sure you all know, prices have changed dramatically over the last year or two, rehab and purchase prices. So some of those comps aren't really all that relevant either because they're too early. This one was just, they're always challenging. This one was more challenging than most for those very reasons.
I know one of the issues that we get into some of these properties that are in this state is how much of the destruction to the building has been done since the purchase of the building. But it sounds like this was in pretty much this shape when they purchased it in 2012.
For this purchaser, yes.
Yes.
I mean, the previous purchaser did a little more to it because they were preparing to do the rehab and preparing to do the addition. So some of the back was torn off.
Right.
But yes, they purchased it like this.
All right. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? If not, do I hear a motion?
I move approval of the demolition of the building based on staff recommendation. And again, these things are very difficult, but the fact that they've got a structural engineer who's stating that it's not worth renovating, and that meets I believe it meets one of the conditions set forth in the guidelines. So I'm basing my approval on that, recommendation on that.
Or hear a motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor of demolition at 204 South 11th Street? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. All right. 919 McFerrin Avenue.
(919) McFerrin Avenue is an application to construct infill and a garage on a vacant lot. Staff is recommending disapproval of the infill, but approval of the garage. Looking at the photo, note that the front property line begins at the retaining wall. The land in front of it is actually Metro property. The site plan shows that the front of the house will be 30 feet back from the property line, and the front porch will be 24 feet from the front property line. The front porch of the house to the left is 30 feet back, and the front porch of the house to the right is approximately 33 feet back from the front property line. Staff would want to see any infill on the site pushed back so that the infill's front porch is between 30 and 33 feet back from the front property line, which would then match the historic context or the neighborhood context. The infill is 38 feet wide and 50 feet deep with a 6 feet deep front porch, and that does match the historic context. Here's an image of the front facade. Staff finds that the infill's roof form, materials, eave height, window proportions, and porch form do not match the design guidelines. While the overall height of 22 feet is appropriate for the district, the house's eave height of 15 feet is taller than what is typically seen on a one-story structure. In addition, the drawings do not indicate an eave overhang for the structure. The applicant is proposing the front portion of the roof be a side gable with a slope of 12-12. The gable portion of the roof only extends 10 feet back, which you can see here in the side elevations. So the gable really only goes back 10 feet from the front wall of the house, and behind that is a flat roof. The owner is intending to have the flat roof portion be a green or a live roof. In order for a roof form like this to be appropriate, the gable would need to extend further back on the house, eave overhangs need to be incorporated, and the eave height needs to be lowered at the front. The front facade includes a central wall dormer. The Commission in the past has not allowed wall dormers, particularly on front facades, and has required that the wall of the dormer be set back 2 feet from the wall below. The dormer therefore does not meet the design guidelines. The primary material for the infill is stucco. Staff did not identify any historic structures in the Greenwood Conservation Overlay with stucco as its primary material. The vast majority of the historic structures in the neighborhood have brick or lap siding as their primary material. The roof material is to be coated steel tile, which is not found in the district. Shingle or standing seam metal roofs are the predominant roof material for historic houses in Greenwood. The house also lacks a foundation line. This is not typical of historic houses in Greenwood, which have a change in material from the foundation to the cladding above. Staff finds the proposed front porch does not match the historic context. The front porch has a flat roof with a second-story balcony accessed via a doorway in the dormer. Staff finds that this roof form does not match the historic context, where porch roofs typically have a gable form or a low-slope shed form. Front porch balconies are also not seen in the district and do not meet the design guidelines. The front porch includes a 12-foot tall porch wall with arched window openings. Tall front porch walls are not seen in the district and do not match the design guidelines. The window openings on the front and on the front portion of the side facades have arched openings. These do not match the proportion of window openings in the district, where most historic windows are rectangular in form and are at least twice as tall as they are wide. Here are the side elevations again. The side facades contain windows that are horizontal in nature and are 3 feet wide and 2 feet tall. Staff finds that these windows do not meet the proportion of window openings because they are not at least twice as tall as they are wide. Here is the rear of the proposed rear facade. And here are images for the proposed garage. The project includes a 20-foot by 30-foot accessory structure that is utilitarian in design, which is appropriate, particularly since the structure will be only minimally visible from the street. The accessory structure will be accessed via an existing driveway and will be located at the rear of the property. The structure meets all base zoning setbacks. The outbuilding will have a flat roof and will be 14 feet tall. The materials will be stucco with a rubber roof that will not be visible. The materials for the doors were not indicated, and staff asked to approve the vehicular and pedestrian doors prior to purchase and installation. Staff finds that the garage's height, scale, materials, orientation, and roof form are appropriate for an outbuilding. And here are some context photos. The photos on the top are the two houses on either side of the site, and the houses on the bottom are directly across the street from the site. And here are some additional photos along McFerrin Avenue, not too far from the site. In conclusion, staff recommends disapproval of the infill, finding that its height, scale, setback, roof form, materials, proportion and rhythm of openings, and orientation do not meet Section 2B1 of the design guidelines. And with the condition that staff approve the door selections, staff recommends approval of the outbuilding, finding that it does meet Section 2B1H of the design guidelines. I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here to address the commission as well.
Okay. Do you all have any questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll open the public hearing, and does the property owner would like to come up and address the commission? If you'll state your name and address, please.
Good afternoon. I'm William Gant. That's my wife, Tony Gant. We live at 1115 Boscoville, and we're wanting to build our house there at 919 McFerrin. And what I've done, I've have a little PowerPoint I want to present to the panel here. The main thing we're looking for is some understanding that while the house is not, that style house is not seen in Greenwood neighborhood itself, it's possible it was there prior to 1950 when they did a lot of the demo in that area, and those houses are scattered throughout East Nashville, and we want to try to be included in that. We have here, like, this is the award-winning building. It was built over there by Little Hollywood. Doesn't quite match everything, but it's a step up and a little bit of difference. We're real close, about a half a block from this building, and we think that our building kind of coincides with the style of this building as well. Doesn't stand out. It also has the arched windows that were one of the problems that we had with the historic zone. Right down the street from 919 McFerrin is 944 Maxwell, and there's a Spanish-style house there. That's in the Maxwell Heights neighborhood. And the Greenwood neighborhood styles, there's a lot of things in that neighborhood that are not historic, and they're fairly recent. One of the things they were mentioned here were about the visible foundation, and most of the stucco Spanish-style houses, they don't see the foundation, but you do see some houses here. The trailer, we have also, I'm not exactly sure what you would call these apartment buildings, but it does not look historic there at 1047 Chickamauga, another trailer with visible foundation. There's also a group of flat roof duplexes on Eastland. We also have another trailer in that area, and what we're trying to do is to bring up that neighborhood and try to maybe pull in some of what's going on the other side of Gallatin Road to the east side or the west side of Gallatin Road. There's over 30 Spanish-style buildings spread throughout East Nashville, and they're from the simple to the elegant. And we believe it's a growing trend in East Nashville that you have flat roofs that are energy efficient. And we have some there a little bit north of Greenwood neighborhood on 825 Delmas, and it also has a patio entrance on the side. Right down the street from where we presently live, a lot of the new homes that are being built also have the flat roof. Even in Little Hollywood, that style is changed. There's a little bit of reflecting of change in that neighborhood. Right up street from Little Hollywood, we also have an area where there's the flat roofs is a growing trend. And we have 405 McEwen, where it's the award-winning design, where it has some of the false fronts and the flat roof as well. Again, our plan is to fill an empty lot with a building that will encourage development while fitting the growth of East Nashville. And then we have this place here at 409 McEwen. Even the older buildings will have that style of the roof and the patio area. And part of what makes East Nashville attractive is the surprising placement of Spanish-style homes. And while we understand that our plans don't necessarily match the Greenwood neighborhood, we think it matches the spirit of East Nashville as a whole. And we would like for you to be able to work with us on that.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right. You all have any questions for the homeowner? Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the commissioner? If not, I will close the public hearing and open up for discussion. I have one question. I'm a little concerned that we would approve an outbuilding and it's saying that it needs to have the character of the home when there's not a home to match it to.
The design guidelines say it can match the home, or it can be very simple and utilitarian in design, so they can go either direction. My guess is, though, if you agree with staff and you disapprove this, my guess is they'll probably redesign the garage to be more in keeping with whatever the design of the house is, but technically it met the guidelines.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to comment. I do appreciate the thought through of the Gants and bringing forth that there are those other neighborhood areas that have this style and is scattered throughout the East Nashville area. However, the Greenwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay was established probably to contain and maintain the non-contrasting structures of that neighborhood. So it seems to me that according to the guidelines, that particular structure does contrast greatly to the established overlay.
Thank you.
I tend to agree with Renee on when you read the guidelines and they use that term by not contrasting greatly. I think this would, but I also think it's a shame that they can't be more flexible to allow something like this. But I would lean towards disapproval. But if a neighborhood wanted to change their guidelines to be more flexible to allow this stuff, maybe that's something for staff to think about and vet the pros and cons of that.
I'll throw one little piece in. I know there was concern with the council person about the not approving the green roof. You have approved green roofs in the past. There's one on the agenda with recommendation for approval later today. It can be done. This particular house, though, just didn't meet the guidelines. So it's not about the green roof, just in case that's a concern.
Anyone else?
Yes, I need to get down here. Thank you. I'm sorry. I wasn't sitting next to the microphone. It's interesting to me that there isn't anybody in the Greenwood neighborhood here to oppose this. I'd like to ask the property owner or the applicant, have you had any opposition, anybody in the Greenwood neighborhood
No.
express opposition to this?
No, we talked to the next door neighbor, and it's actually exactly the same plan as she would like to have. And I talked, we spoke to our next door neighbor at 919 McFerrin, and she is totally for that plan. She's from Philadelphia, but she's always wanted to have the green roof and the live roof. So when she saw what we wanted to do, she was totally for it. Also spoke with Councilman Scott Davis, and he's also for it. I didn't have him come down or ask him to come down for this meeting. I figured if we got a no, then maybe the next one I might try that. But the councilman is in agreement with our plans.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I just wanted to further say that it's just really interesting in some of these cases where we don't have any opposition from the neighbors. When there's opposition from the neighbors, I really take notice. And so here we have this neighborhood with an overlay of homes that are like what has been shown to us. But real close by are these other type houses in the little Hollywood area. I've been out there and I've seen them, and it's a real problem for me when we don't have any opposition from anybody in this particular historic overlay district.
Yeah. I would say to address that a little bit is that I think some of the neighborhoods and living in a historic neighborhood, knowing that those overlays do protect us, and therefore we don't feel like a lot of times that we have to oppose something because there are overlays that are in place to protect it. So and just because there's not opposition sitting here doesn't mean that it's okay. I just think that the overlay is in place and it's been developed by the neighborhoods. So that's sort of a lot of times I don't. I'm feeling that they are saying that the overlay is protecting them, so they don't necessarily have to show up to say we are opposed to this.
Well, that's helpful, and I appreciate that because as the newest member of this commission, that is particularly helpful because I've wondered why in a lot of these cases there doesn't seem to be much opposition from the neighborhood. Okay. So thank you.
Okay.
I mean, I think we all hate to say no. My advice, personally speaking, would be if you're trying to seek something that's a little out of the box or whatnot, is to maybe retain an architect or someone who's got a lot of experience working with the staff, and they may be able to push something maybe forward more than so these sort of schematic drawings. Someone who really knows Robin and the staff, what they would accept and what they wouldn't accept. And that may be worth time, for you to do, or spending some money doing that. I kind of like, what you're trying to do. It's just hard to, I think it's going to be hard to get the approval today. But I would encourage you to maybe again, retain somebody that's worked with the staff and architect and see if you can get a little bit more progress that way, or some something halfway.
A lot, I mean, the staff has the ideas and the guidance that they can give you, but we're not designers, nor are they. But an architect does know sort of where you can give a little and take a little. But I would suggest working with an architect and with the staff. They're very helpful in wanting to make this happen. Okay. All right. Anyone have any more comments, or are we ready to entertain a motion?
So I move to, according to staff recommendation, to disapprove this infill at 919 McFerrin Avenue, and the hopes that the applicant will continue to work with staff on the project.
And that motion does include the approval of the outbuilding?
Oh, so we amend that.
Well, that is part of the staff recommendation, but I just want to make sure that that's included.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll be clear on the motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion to approve staff recommendation, which is the disapproval of the infill and the approval of the outbuilding? That is the motion. Do I hear a second? All in favor of that motion? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. 101 Broadway.
Sorry to keep you waiting. I want to get some notes down before I forgot. This project is for a rooftop addition and exterior alterations. Some windows will be enclosed, one window will become a door, the front doors will be replaced, and staff finds all these changes to be appropriate since the basement windows are not character-defining features. The enclosures can be reversed, the front doors are beyond repair, and the windows and doors still read as openings. The plans note that all the windows are to be restored. However, the applicant would like to request replacement of all the windows. The design guidelines require that historic windows be retained whenever possible. The replacement of the rear windows and the third, as you can see here on the left, and the front third-story windows are either no longer existing or they are in really poor repair, and so staff agrees those could be replaced, but further recommends a window-by-window review of all the other windows to determine which may be replaced and which should be repaired, as well as the type of window to replace them. The rooftop addition meets the design guideline requirements for the side setback, but not the front. The primary wall of the addition sits back 31 feet, which meets the guidelines. The right side of this image is the front wall, but the stairwell has a steep shed roof portion that sits back 19 feet rather than the required 30 feet. The stairwell portion is only 6 feet tall at its tallest point and approximately 9 feet wide. Because this portion is so minimal in height and width and has a steeply sloped roof, it will not be seen from the street. So staff recommends that the stairwell be allowed because of its minimal size, design, and visual impact. The front railing will not rise above the front parapet wall. The side railing sits back from the side wall approximately 12 feet. Other railings for rooftop additions have been closer than that. However, this railing will be taller due to the tall flooring system required by this roof slope, so the additional setback is appropriate here. Staff recommends that the railing, the rear mechanical screen, and any other portions of the building that will be visible from the street not be used to support lighting, signage, speakers, or any other appurtenances. These conditions assure that the addition will not overwhelm the historic character and massing of the building as seen from the street. The visible roof form will read as a flat roof seen from the street, which is in keeping with roof forms in the district. The rear mechanicals will be screened. Staff found that these measures combined prevents the addition from being visually jarring or contrasting with the district. The rooftop is 1 story and does not exceed the maximum 15 feet of height as measured from the top of the parapet wall to the top of the primary form of the addition. However, the 2 elevators, which will add as much as 5 feet to 2 small areas, the towers are located towards the interior property line and will still be minimally visible from the street. The materials for the addition have not been finalized, therefore staff recommends final review of all of the materials for the rooftop addition. No exterior lighting is proposed at this time. The applicant proposes to retain the white paint on the primary facade. Staff recommends approval with the conditions that the applicant seek final approval of all materials and that the railing, the rear mechanical screen, and any other portions of the building that would be visible from the street not be used to support lighting, signage, speakers, or other appurtenances. With these conditions, the project meets the design guidelines and staff recommends approval. And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
Hey, Robin, some of these cases we've seen recently, there have been canopies or temporary structures. Has that been talked about, or everyone understands those are not permitted? Or
Those didn't meet the setback requirements. This one is obviously a lot more than just a canopy. It's a full-on addition. But other than that little stairwell piece does meet the setback requirements.
I mean, I guess what I was saying, some of the ones that are already constructed, they wanted to add some sunscreens, and that got into the setback. Is that why those were not permitted?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So anything that they wanted to add, they would need to come back just like anybody else would.
Will they also need to come back for their approval of their signage?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need?
Unless, of course, it meets the code, and then it can just be approved on the staff level. But if they're asking for anything beyond that, it would come back to you.
Okay. Okay. All right. This item is open for public hearing. Are there any questions of staff before we?
So just hey, Robin, to refresh my memory, the cases, I think you've said this numerous times already, the cases that we've probably denied recently, those have all been because of the front setback?
Right. Some setbacks, materials, issues that didn't meet the guidelines.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of staff?
Oh, if we need them.
Yeah.
I don't know that I know we need them. I'm Steve Tuck with Tuck Hinton Architects.
Josh Hughes, Tuck Hinton Architects.
Thank you.
I want to speak specifically to the window issue. In the past, we have been allowed to use replacement windows. One of the main reasons for this, on 2nd Avenue, we've done a couple projects there that we used new windows. These windows used to be operable. There's no way to put them back operable if we replace them. Even though they could be replaced, we're looking at about $110,000 to fix the windows that are there. We can put all new windows in for about $250,000. We're trying to keep all the brick on the inside of the building exposed. Obviously, there's not very much insulation in the shell of the building. We leave brick exposed. The owner really wants to try to reduce the cooling and heating load on the building by putting double insulated glass. That's the biggest issue. It's all single pane glass. As you know, if you're in a restaurant and you're sitting by the glass, you get this current of cool air coming down single pane glass. So we would like you to consider to actually be able to replace all the windows, even if it's more cost to the owner, for energy reasons. We would do that, obviously keeping the division of the panes, the profiles, the windows, and all that in mind as we've done on other projects. We feel like those windows, even if we replace the windows and paint them, they have lid paint on them that's got to be removed. We paint them. It's a continuous maintenance issue with these wood windows. And most of them are very marginal. They can be replaced, but you're spending a lot to get these old windows. And also, they aren't operable. We'd like to have all operable windows.
So are you suggesting you're putting in new wood windows or new?
They'd be clad windows. Yeah. That's one issue.
Yeah. Other clarification, and I don't want to introduce new information, but we've been kind of working through the design as we go, and on the front elevation, our new roof deck height is such that we'll need to add guardrail on the front, and so we're looking at cable rail as a means to accomplish that height, with it being visibly, as minimal as possible. I think, we'd like to get as close to the parapet wall as possible, and so I think we're looking for your opinion on how close we can get using a system like that that's not as obtrusive.
We would anticipate setting back a couple feet anyway, just to not expose the flashing of the roof and so forth for maintenance. And so we'd have a sort of top rail, and then it'd be cable rail. So the top rail is really what you'd see, not the cable rails.
And that would be to either side of that, if you look at the
That
front
parapet.
elevation.
Either side of the gable form in the middle of it.
What's the height of the parapet now?
It would be about, the new railing would have to be about 2 foot.
Higher than the parapet?
Yes.
But if you set it back 2 feet, you know,
Right.
you might be barely visible from the other side of the street.
Robin, is there a setback for that? Is that?
In the past, you've required railings be set back, and apologize, I'm going off memory here, I believe between 7 and 9 feet, 8 and 9 feet, and it really just depends on the height of the parapet wall. So we didn't know about this part, so I'd recommend maybe, assuming that you're recommending approval, that we deal with that on the staff level, about what that should be.
Okay, all right.
And then just the other clarification, we had traction elevators in here before, and we've since changed to hydraulic, so the penthouse height is the shorter of the two for both. There's not one that's taller than the other anymore.
And I think you were showing about 5 feet in the drawings to them, Robin, and they're now about 2. So those actually are lower than they were. That's all we had. Any questions for us?
Oh, well, I was going to ask it.
Yeah, for clarity, the building section is kind of right through the peak of the tallest part on the elevation.
That's right, and we had a sight line drawn.
Sure.
If you extended that out to somebody across the street, the sight line is cutting through
The lowest portion?
the lowest portion.
Okay,
Correct.
thanks for clarifying.
Is that sight line the dotted line up
Yes.
to the right-hand side? Okay. All right. Anyone have any more questions?
Robin, while they're still here, what's your feeling on their proposal on replacing all the windows with clad?
Well, the guidelines say that they should be repaired rather than replaced. We have not done that assessment of every single window. It's entirely possible that we do, and they do all have to be replaced. But without doing that assessment, I can't say.
What happens if 90% of them need replacing and you still are, the staff wants those 10% that still be salvaged? Is that?
I think it would probably depend on where they are.
I mean, you don't want to get in a situation where you have some windows replaced and then, because they're going to look different. They're going to look different. So we talked about whether you do one floor replaced, the first floor, and then all the others are new or something like that. If we did it, we'd try to do it by floor, I think, is what we discussed.
Can that be handled on a staff basis, Robin, or do you feel comfortable with that? Or?
That's our recommendation, is that they all be assessed.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Thank you all. Is there anyone else that would like to address the commission to this point? All right. We'll close the public hearing and open the floor for discussion here. If I don't hear any discussion, do I hear a motion?
I move approval based on staff recommendation. I guess it's nice to see one of these that's fairly easy on these rooftops.
Do we need to bring up the issue of the windows and how it would be handled? To include that in our motion?
Assuming that you're following the staff recommendations, you do not. That's
Okay.
That's
All
one
right.
of the recommendations.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Mike.
We have.
Point of,
Okay.
I guess,
Question.
clarity question.
We do need a
Let's get
second before
first.
discussion.
Do we have a?
Second.
Okay. Now open for discussion.
The applicant had asked for maybe a little bit of guidance and certainly to provide some for staff if we might discuss while we don't see a drawing, might discuss some guidance for the applicant and the staff on a cable or some sort of railing and what sort of range of setback, maybe based on how we evaluated that in the past. Don't ask me to remember how we've done that, but.
How about if I amend my motion to state that staff and the applicant will work together on the handrail location?
Okay. So the motion has been amended to include discussion and on the handrail.
I'll amend
Okay.
my second.
All
And
right.
second.
Okay. All right. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion as amended?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes as amended. 1818 Wildwood.
This one you saw last month too, and it was deferred by the applicant. The issue last month was whether a duplex could be back-to-back or side-by-side, and whether the context to be followed was the minimal traditional that was prevalent in the area or the two-story historic home across the street. The property is zoned two-family, and they are proposing a duplex as they did last month. Generally, the commission has required side-by-side duplexes as opposed to the back-to-back or back-to-front following the historic forms. However, it's really not possible to obtain two usable units in a side-by-side configuration and also match the context that's that post-war minimal traditional home. Since this property is somewhat divided from the main area of the post-war context by several non-contributing structures, and those are the ones with the little white triangles, and also has the historic context of a two-story building across the street, staff found that the following context of the single two-story building would result in a more appropriate massing and allow you to continue to do the side-by-side duplexes that you have approved in the past. The revision meets the design guidelines in terms of height, scale, setbacks, rhythm of spacing, roof form, orientation, proportion and rhythm of openings, appurtenances, and utility locations, as well as the policy for appropriate attached garages. The majority of materials also meet the design guidelines, although there are a few that are unknown at this time. So staff recommends approval with the conditions that the applicant obtains final approval from staff for the roof color, the brick not be painted, and the applicant obtains final approval from staff for the materials for the foundation, driveway, walkway, cladding, vehicular and pedestrian doors, trim, and railing materials. With these conditions, the project meets the design guidelines for new construction in Belmont Hillsborough. And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions before we ask the applicant to come forward and we open the public hearing? All right.
Robin, will the applicant explain the window positioning?
I'm sure he'd be happy to.
Okay.
It's open for a public hearing. You'll come up and give us your name and address, and thank you.
There's a few other images up there too if you want.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that the one you want? Okay.
Manuel Zeitlin, architect, on 516 Hagen Street. We met after the last meeting. We met with a group of neighbors and Doug Revere, my client, at Fido a few days later, and basically had both designs. We had the 1.5 story scheme we had done, and we had this version. And the idea of, and talk about do they prefer relating, we were fine with either one relating to the post-war houses or relating to the original historic house across the street, and decided to pursue the original historic house. We also met with staff, I think also, separately after we met with the neighbors and got their feedback. So it was really working as a collaboration to try to address their concerns and meet the guidelines. Then and I think the neighbor across the street who lives in this house spoke favorably of the original design, but she also liked the idea that she was fine with the idea of a two-story house that related to hers as well. And in response to the question about the window pattern, basically if you look at the original, that's the house across the street. It's basically 3 windows over, very symmetrical with a central door and 2 windows. And
If they'll switch back, it's just really simple.
So, go ahead.
Yeah.
So the idea is, the historic guidelines state that a building should look like its time. So, I think a lot of what you see are replicas, which really don't necessarily meet the historic guidelines, even though they're, typically done in the neighborhood. So the idea was introducing something new that lets you know this is relating in scale, form, material to the historic house that's here, but that's something clearly new and that's newly built, and it's not trying to be a replica. So that was the idea of trying to introduce a more modern element as part of this design.
Yeah. Well, we thank you for doing the work that you've done on this.
Manuel, can you do one more there? It's that one that's vertical. Is there a design?
Vertical.
Everything else is horizontal, but that one is a vertical.
Which one? The one way in the back? I mean, the one that's sort of
back section, right?
Yeah, I mean I think that's in the. I can't even remember where that is. If it's a bathroom. Oh, that's in the stairwell.
Okay.
But it sits, way back. It steps in 2 feet from the side, I think. So it's not anything that's going to be visible from the front street. And in terms of materials, just so you know, the back pattern is actually hardy panel, and it's we're cutting them in a 2 foot by 4 foot
size, so they create a brick pattern out of the hardy panel, was the idea of that, to, again, kind of play with that material in a different way.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you so much.
Okay, sure.
I appreciate the work you put into that, and thank you. And you just close the public hearing. If there's no one else that would like to address this, I'll close the public hearing and open it up for discussion.
Move approval with staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a recommendation and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes for 1818 Wildwood. 1105 Boscobel.
1105 Boscobel Street is an application for infill construction of a two-family residence. It has been a vacant lot since 1997. The new building will be centered on the lot and meets the design guidelines for setback and rhythm of spacing. Concrete parking pads for vehicle access will be built at the rear of the lot. New sidewalks will be built from each unit to Boscobel Street. The new structure will be 32 feet wide and will have a height of approximately 30 feet from grade at the front. There is some slope. It will be taller than its immediate neighbors, which are 20 and 28 feet tall, but there are several homes nearby that are 30 feet or taller. The size and height of the structure are acceptable for the context and meet the design guidelines for height and scale. Staff also finds the proposed infill to meet the design guidelines for materials, roof form, orientation, and appurtenances. On the side elevations, there is one change from this drawing. We have worked with the designer to replace the narrow horizontal window about at the midpoint on each side with a more traditional one. She's agreed to that. Staff finds that the proposed proportion and rhythm of openings meet the design guidelines. In the context photos, you can see on the top to the left and right of the site. On the bottom is across the street and the church diagonally, which is 38 feet tall and also uphill. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the infill construction at 1105 Boscobel Street with the conditions that siding have a maximum 5-inch reveal and that staff approve windows and doors prior to their purchase.
Paul, what's the height of the gray house to the left there? Is that in excess of 30 feet, I'm assuming?
It's 28 feet, sir.
Anyone else have any questions?
A quick one. Generally, the window patterning on this, and then the proportion and the rhythm of openings looks good. Certainly, what's going to be most visible from the street. One question I have is in identifying this as a duplex, or really it has more to do with the openings on the unit. If you're facing it to the left, is it's unbalanced to the left with the windows stacked, and then there's almost seems like there's a bit of a hole there, and it may be less perceptible in. Not, you can't experience something truly in elevation, so oftentimes it's a misleading. But was there any concern about that at all? In other words, would an opening over the door, while not necessary?
Do you mean centering that second-story window?
No,
over the...
I think not. I think it just, is there any concern that elevation is unbalanced? Certainly the quantity of glass seems quite appropriate for the front-facing. It's a small little thing. You may not be seeing it in the same way that I am.
It is something we actually discussed and all the staff together, and felt like it didn't meet that rhythm of openings, even if it may not be, kind of meet our idea of balance as well, but
Sure.
meet that rhythm.
It just, I'm in 3 dimensions. I wonder if it will read as a little askew. Not a major deal. I just was curious as to whether that was a concern at all.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Anyone else have any, to address the, go ahead and
I'm sorry.
state your name.
We're William Gant, and we live at 1115 Boscobel, which is a few houses down from that. One thing we're really glad someone's going to do something with that lot. It's been vacant for a long time, but that scale is just way too big for that area. Most of those houses in that area are at about the 2,000 to 2,400 square foot houses. So I could see the neighbors, if they found out that that was the style of the house they were planning on building, they would be quite upset. And the fact of having a one single-family residence now being that side-by-side, was that, have I seen that correctly? I think that would also cause problems within the neighborhood, especially on that block, the folks that I know. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? The zone, go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, within that comment, this house is within guidelines. The dimensions and height are within.
Staff found it to be, so yes.
And not contrasting.
That's our opinion and recommendation to you. We also don't, or you don't review whether or not it's a duplex.
But it is within the zoning.
Yes, it is zoned two-family.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, questions?
Of the, it notes that the immediate neighbors are 19 and 20 feet tall each, which is considerably shorter, but it later notes there's several homes nearby that are 30 feet or more. Where are they in relation? I mean, close by?
Yeah, actually on the immediate neighbors, actually the GIS height data that I found previously did not reflect the upper left-hand home, which is 28 feet high. So that's one of those. The neighbor to the right, I believe, is the 20 feet high. On the other side, again in the upper left context photo there's a home that is 30 feet high plus, and then down the street, down Boscobel Street, there's one that is, going off memory here, but I think it's 32 or 33 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Yes. How tall is this one again? I've forgotten.
30 feet, I think it's 30 feet and a couple of inches.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Ben, do you have anything else? Nope. Can we entertain a motion?
I make the motion to approve per staff recommendation for 1105 Boscobel Street.
Okay. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All in favor?
I've been thinking about it. I think I'm going to oppose it.
Okay, all right. So let's take another vote. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? Okay, all right, so noted. All right, the motion does pass. Okay. 913 Fatherland Street.
All right. 913 Fatherland Street. This is a photo here of the vacant lot. It's been vacant for 25 years or so. There was a house there that I believe it burned down a while back. The applicant, who doesn't appear to be here, is proposing to construct a new house and garage. The house will be 2 stories tall with a ridge height of 30 feet and an eave height of 19 feet from grade. The width of the building is approximately 30 feet overall. The leading edge, however, will be 20 feet wide. And then it steps back with a recessed porch at the front right corner. It's kind of hard to tell with the brick on that drawing, but you can maybe see it better on the floor plan. The elevations show an estimate for the grade of the lot that appears to be inaccurate. Staff requests that the elevation be revised to show actual grade prior to any permit being issued. I don't expect the height to actually end up being different, but just slope in the other direction. Instead of going up to the left, it should actually go up to the right. The height and width of the proposed new building will be compatible with surrounding historic houses. The context does include several other 2-story houses on this block, which is the picture on the top row there, and on the next block, which are the 2 pictures below. Full disclosure, the teeny tiny house on the right of the bottom right picture is my house. Teeny tiny little house next to that big house. The primary exterior material of the new house will be brick, changing over to siding within the second-story wall space, but with a soldier course marking the second floor level. This effect is similar. The horizontal banding effect is similar to something that's been found to be compatible in the past and has been approved on 2 other projects in this district, 900 Boscoville and 800, actually Fatherland, I mislabeled that, are 2 projects. One is infill, one is actually an addition, but effectively they have that same appearance. And as I said, staff has found that to be compatible. The roof design the roof will be hipped with a pitch similar to those roofs of historic houses. The material of the roof will be a composition shingle. Staff is asking to review the color and texture of the brick and the roofing material, and also the material of windows and doors. Speaking of windows and doors, I guess I can stay there. Staff finds that generally the front and this right side elevation, the proportion and rhythm of windows is compatible with historic houses nearby. And on the left elevation, generally compatible with the exception of the first story front portion, which is outlined there in orange. Typically, a highly visible, prominent wall close to the front would have larger and or more openings for the amount of wall space. Generally, 1 window every 10 to 12 feet. And typically also windows on a first story are taller, or at least as tall as the second story windows. So staff would also ask that that window be enlarged to be more appropriate in size. The garage, located at the rear of the lot, accessed from the alley, will be 21 feet tall with a 550 square foot area and bonus space above. It's not a dadu, it's not for living space. And because it's a 2-story house, 1.5 to 2-story, 1 3/4 story garage is appropriate. And the materials of this outbuilding will match those of the new house. Summing up, staff recommends approval of the application to construct a new house and outbuilding with the conditions that the elevations be revised to reflect the grade accurately, that a walkway be added from the front porch to the sidewalk, that the window I indicated on the left elevation be a more appropriate proportion, that brick and window and roofing materials and textures be approved by staff, and finally, that any permanent landscape features, including retaining walls and other appurtenances like fences and exterior lighting, be approved by staff. But with those conditions being met, staff finds that the application would meet the design guidelines for new construction in the Edgefield Historic Preservation Zoning Overlay.
One question on the asking for a larger opening along that side. I noticed that is a bathroom along there and I guess a closet maybe?
Yeah, I noticed that a closet off the...
I mean, it could be a false window, but have you brought that up? I mean, has the property owner...
They didn't... They said they were all right with everything.
Okay.
They didn't really go into a whole lot of detail, but if that's something the commission would be acceptable to.
I mean, I certainly agree with you. It's just that I see that it's a bathroom and that sort of, it may need some special attention if they were to put something there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And the front porch is 7 feet, not the one right next door. The little
Yeah, it's like
turned
half,
out to be nothing.
half shallow, yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions of staff?
Sean, the windows in the front facade, you may have already talked about this, the horizontal to the right of the bay window, those we don't see very often, or?
True. I guess staff's take on it was sort of like the take that was on the previous case, although in that case, the statement was made by the applicant. But one of the difficulties in something being compatible with historic but still reading of its time is allowing, if the form is very replicates a historic form, to allow something else that sort of sets it apart. So the window rhythm being 3 essentially symmetrical bays looking across the front, doing that treatment would help. Just it doesn't disrupt the rhythm, certainly.
Is the window of that porch that goes into that bedroom that same stack of 3?
Yeah. Do I have the side? Yep. That
okay.
side elevation
Okay.
there has the same thing.
The overall proportion meets the historic proportions. I think that's what.
And it is the same, it doesn't look it. It is the same size as the 2 windows in the bay, and a single, half the bay.
Keep going to the wrong direction here.
Okay.
Yeah, if anything, it may be slightly wider and taller than the window above. Those horizontal windows within a vertically oriented opening is perhaps something that you might see on a prairie-style house. Not saying necessarily this is one style or another, but certainly inspired.
Okay. Any other questions, discussion? I don't think there's anyone here to close the public hearing.
Now that you all have pointed that out, I mean, couldn't they have designed it a little more similar to the bay window, to where it had a transom on the top? Just a comment. Where it'd be consistent. It does look a little strange in the front.
That could be something that the commission, if they wanted to add a condition for that window, that's certainly all right with staff.
All right. Any other comments? Do I hear a motion?
I'll move approval with staff's recommendation.
Do I hear a second?
Second. And I just wanted to say that I'm going with this one, that I didn't go with the last one, because I see taller homes in this area than I did in the last one. I just wanted you to know that.
Did you see what?
A few taller homes around.
Oh, okay.
So it looks a little more consistent with the neighborhood.
Okay. All right.
That's the reason I didn't go for the last one.
All right. Okay.
So I second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion does pass. That's it.
I believe that's the last
We
item.
don't have any more business, but I will remind everyone that the January meeting, we will be meeting earlier for a session prior to the meeting.
Yes, and I'll send you a reminder as well, and it'll be on your agenda. And happy holidays.
Same to you.
Well, happy
All right.
holidays to you too. We meet our goal, our CLE, whatever you call it, goal, by going to that meeting.
Like, are we done?
Yeah.
We'll make it up.
All right.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion to adjourn.